we expect from the regional summit in Chad? Any good news?
Good news. That's an interesting one. I think a lot of news. I think whether it's good news or not depends on who you are. Most people in the Central African Republic are hoping that rumors regarding the transitional president Michel Djotodia and his removal from power are true. They are just rumors right now, but a number of senior diplomatic sources, both from various African countries and from France, have hinted very strongly that in the Chadian capital, either today or tomorrow, the Chadian president Idriss Déby is going to ask, or probably more correctly, tell Djotodia that he should step down. He's a very divisive force in the Central African Republic. Also, one of the things that the Chadian leader will have to do is bring his regional leaders on board regarding the peacekeeping mission that's operating in the Central African Republic. The AU-led mission, called MISCA, involves mainly troops from regional countries: Chad, Congo-Brazzaville, Congo-Kinshasa, Cameroon, Burundi, and very soon Rwanda as well. They replaced another mission called FOMAC back on December 19th. There's a lot of controversy about this mission, whether or not it's capable, or whether or not it's equipped to restore some kind of peace in the Central African Republic. It's generally believed by a lot of CAR watchers that their chances of success are very poor. Last week at the United Nations Security Council, all members of the Security Council agreed that some sort of UN assistance should be offered to MISCA. Whether or not that assistance should be logistic or creating a UN peacekeeping mission is not clear. Chad is against that. That's
what I wanted to ask, David. Should the AU-led peacekeeping force be replaced by a UN force?
Something needs to change. There's been some kind of peacekeeping operation, or at least observer mission, in the Central African Republic for more than 15 years. There was a full-blown UN peacekeeping mission in the late 1990s. That was replaced by an observer mission in the early 2000s. And then 2 years ago, a regional mission called FOMAC, or MICOPAX, was set up, and only in the last 2 weeks was replaced by MISCA, the AU-led force. The common denominator with all of these peacekeeping/observer missions is they have not brought peace to the Central African Republic. Things were bad under former President Francois Bozize, who was ousted in the military coup that all South Africans know about in March, because that's where members of the South African National Defence Force were sadly killed. Now the country's in a spiraling state of violence that's much worse than anything it's ever experienced. The big problem in the Central African Republic is that nobody's in charge. Djotodia came to power, but it's a very nebulous sort of power. He remains hunkered down in his military compound in Bangui and doesn't even have control of the city itself.
But people are calling for him to step down. Do you think this is likely going to happen? I mean, he's ineffective as it is already.
Well, that depends on a couple of factors. He's got nowhere to go.
Absolutely.
In terms of a peace agreement that was signed in the Gabonese capital last year now, in January, this time last year, a transitional government is in place in the Central African Republic. And according to the peace agreement, elections must be held by February of next year. At that point, when the elections are held, Djotodia and all the people in his administration, including his Prime Minister Nicolas Changai, are not allowed to run in that election. So in the longest case scenario for Djotodia remaining in power is that he stays in power until elections are held next February. It's very unlikely that he'll last that long. The only support that he really has right now comes from a very small part of the northeastern region of the country, a predominantly Muslim part of the country called Vakaga, and to some extent from support he gets from Sudan and from Chad. David, if that support falls away, he's got nothing.
David, what do you think actually causes the unrest in the Central African Republic?
Well, it's a vacuum of lawlessness. Well, To some extent, yes, except nobody has ever really been in charge
power,
of the entire country.
yes.
From independence in 1960 straight through today, January 2014, there's been no single person who's shown the kind of leadership that a Mandela of South Africa has shown. Even in the best of times in the Central African Republic, and I use the best with many reservations, there's been no leader has really had any influence outside the capital, Bangui, apart from perhaps in his native village or regional urban area.
Very quickly, David, what do you think are possible amicable solutions to try and end this it's almost a civil war?
Yeah, I think we're going to need some really strong action from the international community, and that includes the African Union, and it includes the European Union, and it includes the United Nations.
Absolutely.
Last month, the French President François Hollande, who has 1,600 troops in the Central African Republic, met with his European counterparts and asked for support from European nations. At the time, they were very cagey and said, we're not really interested in offering boots on the ground. Now there's some talk that they're thinking about possibly adding to support for MISCA, the AU mission. The UN is setting up a panel of experts on the Central African Republic to determine what action should be taken to bolster MISCA as well. Perhaps a full-blown UN peacekeeping mission would be a step in the right direction. Perhaps a sort of transitional administration, along with the United Nations did in places like Kosovo or East Timor, might be an answer as well.
Thank you, David. But we have seen instances where the civilians themselves don't want the peacekeeping missions to take place because they say that it actually spurs on the violence. But thank you so much, David, for talking to us. That was David Smith, who's a director at Okapi Consulting. That's your news.